So I just got done watching The Last of Us episode 4 and it was really good, man. Every episode so far has just been outstanding, whether it was the first, second, third, especially I love the third. And then this one really felt like The Last of Us's story finally coming into fruition. We got to see Joel and Ellie actually on the road for the first time, because the first two episodes were the setup. We had Bill and Frank's episode, which was a bottle episode, which I loved, but it took away from Joel and Ellie. And then we had this episode now. So this was all about Joel and Ellie, like I mentioned, traveling. I forget what city they said. I think they were in Kansas City when everything went down that we're going to get to in this video. But this is the episode where you start to really see them form a bond. And really, man, I gotta say, this was adapted like one for one to the game. It's actually pretty insane. Like I said in previous reviews I've done, I didn't ever fully play The Last of Us. I only watched it on my friend's couch in his dorm, so I never really got the opportunity to play it hands-on. So there wasn't moments of violence that I got to see and things like that, and which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But here you get a similar experience. Like, the same story pans out, but you don't see the violence that you could have seen when you were playing in the game, because you got to do certain things in the game that could be violent and stuff like that. Here, I'm a little mixed. I'll be completely honest with you. I'm not someone who's a big fan of gore, but I kind of also would like to see a little bit of it in a show like this. And I get what they're going for, where this show is really just about love. Like, the Last of Us Part 1 is really a show about love between like father-daughter sort of thing. And I totally get that. And having the violence, having the apocalyptic vibe and all that stuff in there kind of deviates from that. But I don't know. I feel like they pulled away from certain moments in this episode without really showing them, which I thought would have been really great, especially since in some of the earlier episodes we saw a little bit of that. We're going to get into that in a minute. But I got to say, before we even get to that, this episode was really well done, just like the rest of them. The set pieces were gorgeous. Some of the wide shots that they had in this episode of them driving through certain parts of whatever state they were in, I can't remember what state they were in, Kansas City, and all that stuff was just amazing. Like the shot of them on the bridge, and to see everything in despair, to see the train that had collapsed in and things like that, it just all looked so magnificent. And that's obviously, it's not that big of a deal when you compare to everything else that was in the episode. Like this episode really was pretty much a spitting image of what I could remember from God, back in the day when I was watching it on my friend's dorm. For instance, the nudie magazine, the scene with the nudie magazine with Ellie looking at the picture of man's dong and her saying that, why are the pages sticky, and Joel just being like awkward about it. That was straight up ripped pretty much one for one from the game, from my memory. I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit here and look up to see, oh, was it actually what it said? But it seemed like it was identical. I recently watched that scene back. I don't know, I saw it on YouTube or something like that. And yeah, it's like the same exact scene, which, again, I've said this before, nothing needs to be one for one for it to be a good adaptation. But when they do it in tasteful ways, and when it is one for one and it's done right, it's done right. Like, this was done right. That was a small little part, but the rest of it was also in there. Like the whole driving of them and everything that went down really in this episode was pretty much one for one from the game. And that is great to see, especially when they get into Kansas City. And in Kansas City, there's the guy that well, first they see the quarantine zone is like open. They're like, that's weird. Isn't that a QZ? And then they see the guy who needs help, but it's really just a stick up and all that stuff. That is one for one from the game. But where I wanted to say that I kind of feel like they deviated a little bit, not really deviated, but they didn't explore, which I figured they would just a little bit more, was the violence. Because what happens in that scene is, obviously, those raiders, I don't know the names of the groups again, I'm not really good at that. The people that were from Kansas City, those people that attacked Joel and Ellie, when Joel finally caught up to them and he, I guess, stabbed him, whatever happened to him and all that stuff, they didn't show that. They followed Ellie with it, which is fine. Like, it worked. The episode was still great, but I kind of wish we stuck with it just a little bit, because I feel like in an apocalyptic world like this, it's kind of nice to be gritty like that sometimes. And again, this isn't some, like, I'm not like, you know, advocating seeing violence or anything in shows, whatever, it doesn't really matter, but it would have been nice to have just a little bit of it. We missed that here. I mean, even Ellie shooting the guy, and then all of that followed after, there was none. Or when the lady shot the guy in the Fedra prison, I guess it was, like, they don't show it. Fine, it's not the end of the world, but here and there it's okay to throw it in. I kind of hope we get a little bit of that later, because there are for sure some moments in The Last of Us that show that stuff. And even though, like I said, it's not the end of the world that we don't see it in this episode, it would have been nice to have a little bit of that. But regardless, I don't want to harp on that too much, because what we got in this episode with Joel and Ellie was truly fantastic. Like, them actually starting to get comfortable around each other. What this episode was breaking that barrier. And all it was Ellie was trying to get Joel to laugh. In theory, that is the driving heart behind this episode, and it was just done so well, especially how at the end, we finally got to see Joel start to really give in to Ellie. And here's where you could see him starting to care more. You could see him breaking down that barrier of this hardened person and all that, and really starting to get a sense of the importance of Ellie to him and stuff like that. And it was just done so well from that perspective. And in all the scenes of them camping, whether it was actually in the woods or whether it was on the 33rd floor of the building, you know, all of those little moments, it really was just done very well. Some of the humor in it was actually really funny too. Like the diarrhea joke about how it runs in your genes at the end. That actually made me laugh too. That was funny. And then some of the other, no pun intended, jokes in there was really great. This would be a great episode, and I can't wait to see what some videos people do of like the Easter eggs of this episode, because this was ripped straight from the game. Like this, I'm actually blown away. They brought this to screen so well, and I really loved everything that they did in it. And I'm really interested to see what happens going forward, and if they're going to follow that suit. I mean, we've already seen a bit of a mixed bag, right? We've seen deviations that are strong, and we've seen deviations that are really minor. Bill and Frank being an example of something strong. Tess's, the way she died was an example of something minor, and the tendrils and all that stuff. Like, so we're seeing a mixed bag, but this one felt the most real to one of the actual cutscenes in the game. So I'm interested to see how they proceed with that, and it's going to drive me insane. The man with his little brother, I can't remember their names. They showed up at the very end of this episode, holding Ellie and Joel to gunpoint. I'm very, very excited to see that storyline, because it's going to be, you know, really interesting to see how they do all of that to screen. But the only part of this that I wasn't a big fan of, that I know is partly from the game, I wasn't really a big fan of the side plot with the woman and that guy who were like, first off, the woman who was interrogating the guy and then shot him. Didn't really care for that. And I also didn't really care for whatever it was under the ground that was moving. I honestly can't remember what that was and what that's supposed to be, so I am excited to see it, but I feel like it lost me a little bit there, and I feel like they focused a little too heavy on those two individuals in this episode than I would have personally liked to. I wish we got a little bit more of Joel and Ellie, but the sense that I'm getting from this episode and from this show overall is they give you just enough to be wanting more. And I was listening to the podcast on, I think, the first episode, and they really blatantly said that that's exactly what they're doing with the show, but it bothered me in an episode like this. Like, I wanted more time. This was definitely the shortest runtime. I'm looking at the runtimes right now. First episode was 1 hour and 20. Second episode was 52 minutes. Long time, episode 3, that was 1 hour and 15, and this was only 45 minutes, and it felt short, and it was a little unfortunate. And it's pretty crazy to say that a 45-minute episode feels short, but it really did, and I felt like they just needed a little bit more time in this episode to develop a lot, but I could see why they did it this way. They're setting up a lot of stuff to come, and I don't think this show is moving too slow or too fast. I think this show is moving just right, but this was the only episode where I was like, I just want like 10 more minutes. Just give me 10 more minutes. I was really bummed that I didn't get that, and now I'm even more excited for next week. Unfortunately, I'm going to be in San Francisco at the time of that episode coming out, so I'm going to be watching it late, but man, I loved this episode. I still think the first two, like episode 2 and episode 3, I think were better than this personally, but I really liked what they did here. I liked the development that Joel and Ellie had. It felt very true to the game, and it felt right. It didn't feel bad. It wasn't weird. It just worked really well. Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey are just, again, killing it, man. They are absolutely killing it. I'm blown away more and more by this show each episode we get, and I can't wait to see what else they do. But that's really it. Those are my first impressions of the episode. Want to know what you guys thought about it? Let me know down below. Again, I'm not really a big game aficionado. I can't wait for it to come out on PC, because then I'm really going to play the living crap out of it. But that being said, I want to know what you guys think about this episode. I feel like this one is going to be a little bit controversial for some. I was talking to my cousin today about how if they didn't do the scenes that I was saying wasn't violent enough, if they didn't do them right, it would have been kind of a flop of an episode. And I think to him, he's going to be disappointed. I don't know, but I'm interested to hear how you feel about that. I'm somewhere in the middle. I wish they showed a little bit more violence in this episode, but I don't want it to be overkill at the same time. I just think it needs both. It needs a little bit of that and a little bit of more of the love story that they're telling here and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the episode. If you like this video, make sure you like it. If you want to subscribe, go right ahead. I have Last of Us content, Walking Dead content, and a ton of other stuff as well. But with that out of the way, thank you so much for watching this video, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.